May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Kathie Fischer. And, I'm going to read what Zen Center has on Kathie because it's perfect. All right. Sokaku Kathie Fischer. Sokaku Kathie Fischer began practicing Zen in 1971 with Sojun Mel Weitsman at the Berkeley Zen Center. She was ordained a Zen priest at San Francisco Zen Center in 1980 by Zentatsu Richard Baker and continued residential practice at Zen Center for 15 more years. She received Dharma transmission from Sojun Weitsman in 2011 while in the midst of her 28-year career as a school teacher in Mill Valley. Since retiring from teaching science to adolescents, she has turned her attention to studying and teaching Dharma. Kathie and her husband, Norman, are parents of adult twin sons and grandparents of 3 children. Well, that seems pretty complete. Look, you're going to discover more when I call her. I think the parts where we talk about Richard Baker are notable, and I don't know. We talk about a lot of things. It was really great. I really loved talking with her. And all right, so take it away. Hi there.
Hi, David.
Oh, good. So, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you? Good morning.
Yeah. Good evening. Yeah. Yes, all is fine. Yesterday was Wesak, Buddha's birthday.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's very festive in Bali?
Well, maybe some places. We just got together with some people and had 20 minutes of zazen with their kids and dinner. He'd been at Zen Center for years. They just live around the corner. So,
nice.
Yeah, that was neat. What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. We've been busy. Norman just left this morning for Detroit and Tucson for poetry readings. And, Richard Baker and Nicole came over to our house for dinner on Friday night.
Wow. That's great.
Wow. It was really sweet.
Yeah.
Gary Friedman and Trish also. So actually, Trish was sick, so it was just Gary and Norman and I and Richard and Nicole. We had a lovely time.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
They're spending this week they've been at Zen Center for a week, and they're spending this week at Zen Center in the building and giving several talks.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I did a podcast talk with Nicole yesterday, and I knew she was in the building because I could see the room behind her had not changed. And I didn't realize they were going to leave at least that room exactly like, or at least what was behind her, I knew right away that was the Page Street building. That was great. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful that, Zen Center is opening up and welcoming them and really appreciating them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Just,
about time, right?
yeah, I just reviewed, in an instant, reviewed the past, how many decades?
Yeah, like it only took, what, 40 years, but still.
Right. Um, well, yeah, that happens with religious groups and institutions. Founders and teachers. There's always some murky stuff happening to different degrees. Uh,
Yeah, and sometimes I think the group just has to grow out of it. And so there's this whole generation that doesn't care at all about the some stupid scandal that happened in 1982 or something, whatever it was.
Three.
The three, they don't care at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I, when was that? So maybe 16. No, no, no. 8 years ago, nine years ago, I was visiting Dharma Sangha, Baker's group there, right, for a month because it was their 20th anniversary and his 80th birthday, and they flew me there, so that's why I could afford to be there. And then I went with him around to some seminars he was doing, and then some of his students took care of me in Berlin, and I gave a talk to which I very rarely do, or I met with a Shambhala group. And I referred in some way to Trungpa's lifestyle or something. And the woman who was like my host for it, she said, nobody these days cares about that, or it's not, they don't even know it. It's like that so far back in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. It's part of our childhood, but it's for others it means nothing. That's great.
Yeah, but it does follow Baker, and it follows in a very distorted way.
Yeah.
I just wrote something because of somebody was accusing him of things, and I wrote something, and I said, I've interviewed and have the memories of emails and stories of hundreds of women who's practiced with Richard Baker, and there's lots of complaints, but there's nothing about sex. There's nothing. Never once. No woman ever accused him of abuse or anything. I said, so if you want to beat up on him, there's more fertile ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sex is it's like sticky. It's like glues. Kubrick made the movies. He said, "Kiss it, it's X. Cut it off, it's PG." You got that? So, all right. Enough of all that. So, yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to know that, and we'll see. And they have this weekend coming up. So, what do you have coming up?
Well, I'm teaching the Everyday Zen seminar at the moment, which meets once a week on Wednesdays. So I'm doing a 6-meeting series on the Madhyamakas and Nagarjuna, and I'm really having fun with it. It's really interesting. It's an interesting challenge to try to convey the importance and the beauty of it, because it's so, when you look at the language, it's so gnarly. It's not exactly warm and cozy, but my major in college was Buddhist studies, and I studied Nagarjuna when I was, 23, and it's kind of always been in my bones, and so I'm just having a lot of fun. I'm putting a lot of time into figuring out how to convey the beauty and the importance of the thing, because it's very easy to just get bogged down in the logic and end up feeling stupid and feeling like you don't know what it's talking about. So I'm trying to kind of open it up for people. So that it's a challenge, but I'm really enjoying it.
Kanze called that the crowning glory of the human cortex.
Mm. Yeah, Kanze did. Yeah.
So, well, go on.
Well, let's see.
You've got a group, right?
Yeah, I have a little group, and my group is maybe unusual compared to other groups because it's not posted anywhere. It's not. It's not. I mean, I don't have a blog. I don't have a mailing. I have a mailing list, but I don't have a presence online at all. So my group is composed of people that I have met personally over the years in Mexico and at Upaya and at Zen Center, who just, express an interest in spending more time with me and studying with me. So the people are located in Uruguay, Mexico, all over the US, the Northwest Territories, China. I have somebody in China. And we get together every other week. And we've been doing this now for 6 years. So it's a really cohesive group that really enjoys each other's company and they've really come to know each other. So it's called Dharma Friends. And my interest is really supporting friendship in the Dharma and not have it be all about me or all about a teacher or all about some authoritative, text or word about what people should be doing and thinking. I really want to support friendship and mutual support in the Dharma. Because for me, what I've found, I love all my teachers, including Richard Baker, but I also find that just the companionship in the Dharma has been really important to me over the, 53 years or something, whatever it is that I've been practicing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Suzuki Roshi emphasized that too at times, and sometimes he would say, I'm your, sort of like I'm your Dharma friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good. Well, you and I are Dharma friends.
Yes.
I remember your Shuso ceremony. It might be the last one I ever saw. I stopped going to them because I had to sit right in the second seat or third seat, right in the middle. And I didn't.
You were Shuso. You were one of the first Shusos, right? You were.
Well, yeah. I was maybe the 10th Shuso or the 12th or something, But people were. There would be like Mel and me there or something.
Yeah.
And but your Shuso ceremony was very impressive. So tell your students I had that to say. I mean, it stands out to me as one of actually yours and Blanche's. And there's one other, Jerome.
I remember Jerome's. Jerome's was astonishing.
Jerome's, I might have, I can just see it, but I might have just heard so much about it that I feel I was there.
I can't, I don't think he was Shuso at Tassajara.
Yes, he was.
Was?
Yeah.
Okay, then it would have been, gosh, anyway, I remember seeing him sitting on the Dharma seat and just being this incredibly gentle, forthcoming person.
Well, I really feel like I was there. I mean, talking about things that long ago, and since I hear things all the time, a lot of time I don't know what I experienced and what I sort of experienced vicariously. What I see is that he was totally at home, sitting there, and the questions were just like little ping pong balls. He was batting back effortlessly, and I experienced that in talking to him too. If I was asking him a Dharma question, he just right away answered. If somebody asked me a Dharma question, I go, "Oh, gee, I don't know. What do you think?" or something. But anyway, I'm very impressed. So now I'm not saying the others. It's not like I don't like to compare, but anyway. Yours just, I was very struck by it, very impressed.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah. So, what's your way-seeking mind story? I mean, where were you born?
My way-seeking mind story, well, it's not short. Do you want to hear the whole thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no limit.
Yeah. So I was born in Berkeley. And my parents moved to Los Angeles when I was, I think, 2, because my father was in the aerospace industry. So I grew up in Los Angeles, over by the beach, along with the Rise and the Beach Boys and all that. But when I got to be about, I think 13 or 14, I happened across a book on Zen. It was Alan Watts' book. And I read it and I thought, oh my God, I feel like I'm reading myself. I was smitten immediately and kind of never turned back. But at the same time, I was maybe 14-ish. My father was stationed in China during World War II. He was in the Flying Tigers. And he came back from China he did not see the horrors of war much because he was an airplane mechanic. So he came back with this just love for China. He just loved the country and loved everything about it, and it really changed his life. So that was a big presence in my childhood. And then his older brother, after World War II, joined the CIA. So he was stationed in Japan and then Korea and then Vietnam. So when I was 14, he was in Vietnam, the CIA.
What year were you born?
1952. And then their oldest brother was a nuclear physicist. He had worked on the Manhattan Project. He was a student of Oppenheimer at UC Berkeley.
Wow.
And was called to work on the Manhattan Project. So at some point when I was around 14, I realized what my family was doing in their work life. And I was just horrified. And of course, I also saw that these 3 men were very nice people. They weren't like conservative. They were just doing what was offered in their generation. It was a moment of history. But I knew, and I didn't hate them or resent them, but I knew that I wanted nothing to do with that. So the combination of that strong feeling about, what I wanted from seeing what my family was up to and reading these books. I just wanted to make a straight line to from age 14 to practicing Zen. So when I graduated high school, I went to UC Berkeley and showed up on the steps of the Berkeley Zen Center, knocked on the door. I was a kid, and Mel opened the door and gave me Zazen instruction.
What year?
So that would have been, I went to UC Santa Barbara my first year, so it would have been 1972.
Mm.
And I started sitting in September, or 3 maybe, and a couple of months later, Suzuki Roshi died.
71.
He died in 71. Okay, then it was 1971 that I went to Berkeley. And I remember that morning when I went to the Zendo. I walked to the Zendo every morning early, and there was a kind of quiet feeling, and then the announcement was made. I don't think it was at the beginning of Zazen. I think it was after the second period, before service. The announcement was made that Suzuki Roshi had died.
Hmm. So, you arrived at Zen Center while Suzuki Roshi was alive.
Just the last few months.
Yeah. Wow. That's a long time
Of course,
ago.
I never saw him. Yeah.
Well, minor detail.
Minor detail, but I knew he was there.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So, how was the Berkeley Zen Center?
Oh, it was great. It was, I'm still friends with many of the people that are still living that were there at that time. It was a great community. It was 1971, and so it was, had some wild sides and, some experimental sides. But the practice, Mel was from a certain point of view, he wasn't strict, but he loved the practice as it was. He felt no need whatsoever to make adjustments for people. He just loved the forms. He thought, he was an artist, and you could tell that it touched him as an artist, the forms and the enactment of them, the practice of them, and the teaching of them, I think, was really, it went very deep for him. And I always felt that it touched him as an artist to practice this way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I, on the other hand, I remember walking in the Zendo thinking, oh shit, this is like the military. And so I thought, I love Zen. I want to do Zen. What am I going to do about this? So I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to think of it as military. I'm going to think of it as a dance. When you come to the Zendo, there's forms, and it's like learning a dance. You want to learn the dance, you want to get it right so that you can dance with others. Remember, folk dancing was popular at that time. And the thing is, you want to dance together so that, you feel like one body. And so I sort of told myself, okay, this is a dance. And that's why we're learning to do this all the same.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. I've used that. I've said to people, well, when you watch a ballet, do you start thinking about it and criticizing it and wondering what is the purpose of this?
And I share that story with people who tell me that they have trouble with they see the forms as rigid and unfriendly and all that. And I say, well, the learning process entails a lot of different behaviors. And sometimes when you're just learning something, I was a school teacher for many years. And when children are learning something, they kind of tighten up. They really want to get it right. And they try to do it, and they do it and do it and do it. And then they learn it, and then they can relax, so it's part of the process of learning, when you are learning something that you don't already know, that it's something way different from what you know.
Yeah. Now, Mel's wife, Liz, she really didn't like the forms and she couldn't stand the Japaneseness, but there was never a problem with her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Liz is still my best friend. I see a lot of her. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, how did it progress? You were there at the Berkeley Zendo. Did Mel become like your primary teacher?
Well, at that time, there was. He was the only teacher. At the Berkeley Zen Center. And yes, he was my primary teacher, and he was very kind and very patient with me.
Why did he have to be patient with you?
Well, because I was a kid, I would come to him and say, I can't stop thinking, and he would say, oh, well, how about put your attention on your belly? Or he would just say, there, you can do this.
So, so you're living there, and were you going to UC Berkeley and as a student?
Yes, and my major was Buddhist studies.
Oh, did you study with Dr. Lancaster?
And I took Dr. Kanza's class when he was a visiting professor one year.
Yeah, I went to some of those.
He was a wild man, wasn't he?
Yeah. He caused some trouble there at Berkeley. Tell me what you got from Kanze and Lancaster. What do you think about them?
Oh, well, Lancaster was wonderful. He was really he was a real Buddhist studies shepherd. He really would just take anyone and just help them and explain. And of course it was a college class, so we had a program that we had to come up to. But he was just very patient and helpful, and I always found that about him. Norman and I bumped into him over the years, sometimes taking the airporter to the San Francisco airport from Mill Valley. And because at some point he moved to Stinson Beach.
Yeah.
So, we would bump into him from time to time. And he was always just this very interested and supportive person. And Kanza, I remember he had such a sharp mind, and he was so, he messed around a lot. And I never knew the stories, but it was clear that he was, a kind of person who messed around a lot.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know what I mean by that, but he didn't, he would, if you remember, he would make horrible statements, sexist statements.
Yes.
And anti-Semitic statements too.
And racist statements.
And absolutely racist statements. And it was kind of like, whoa, did he really just say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I went to see him once in his office, and I thought, is this the right thing to do, Kathy? Am I doing the right thing? But I went in, and he sat me down, and he said, "When is your birthday?" And he looked up my chart and said, "Oh, you're a Pisces like me. Oh, you have an Aquarius moon. That means you're going to be wandering around a bit." And then he said, "What would you like to know about Buddhism?" And then we had just a little chat. I can't quite remember even what it was, but he was just very friendly. And then after a few minutes, it was time to go. And he said, "Thank you for coming to see me." And that was that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he was really into astrology. He told Suzuki Roshi not to let Dick be the habit because his chart showed that he would spend too much money and fritter away the what do you say the the money of Zen Center? No, you don't say money. You say the
The funds and the yeah.
yeah the assets. That's
Yeah,
the
the
word he
asset.
used.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, yeah. He also would make a point that he was a communist. Did you ever hear that?
yes, yes, I remember that, and I like that. I was definitely a pinko myself.
Actually, he wouldn't say communist. He'd say Marxist, and he'd say that Buddhism and Marxism are identical. It's just not in practice.
Uh-huh.
Things
Uh-huh.
like that. It was so funny. But
Yeah.
his main point was Prajnaparamita, right?
Yes, yeah, and I mean, I'm using his book for this Madhyamaka class that I'm doing, and he is such. Um, some of it is dated because there's been so much scholarship done by our contemporaries, which wasn't around then. When
Yeah.
I studied Buddhism, it was all done by scholars. None of the writing was done by practitioners, unless they were Tibetan monks or something like that. But it was all these, erudite scholars. So you kind of had to wrap yourself around their language and so on. And now we have tons of good sources for Buddhist studies written by our peers
Mm.
who are also practitioners. But anyway, at that time, not so. But his books still stand up. They're still good.
Are you aware of Frederick String's book Emptiness?
String?
String, Streng.
Oh, yes.
Around
Yes.
that time, Emptiness came out.
Yeah, I think I have it on my stack here. I have this stack of
Right.
everything I can find around the house on Madhyamaka and emptiness.
So I was in a class where Kanze sounded like he was furious that I knew String. He was from Dallas. He was a Methodist minister and a
Oh,
professor at SMU
oh,
in Dallas, and played college football. I'd watched football games with him when I was home for the holidays.
oh.
Kanze was furious that String had written this book on emptiness, and then he said what really made him mad was that it was the best translation of Nagarjuna he'd ever seen.
Well, good for him for being honest anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So, so where did all this take you? What happened next?
Well, let's see. What happened next is somewhere along the line in those early years at the Berkeley Zen Center, Norman showed up and we met and instantly fell in love. And I think it took us about a year, but actually during that year, I went to Green Gulch for about 3 months and worked on the farm. So that would have been after I graduated. So it would have been 74, 75, something like that. And but then, I came home. I came back to Berkeley to visit Norman on the weekends, and lo and behold, I was pregnant.
Aha.
So we asked Richard, and by that time we had decided, Norman especially wanted to go to Tassajara. And by that time I did too. I wanted to, after I graduated, I wanted to go to practice full time.
Yeah.
So we decided we wanted to go to Tassajara. So then we made contact with Richard, and he was in the mood to encourage young people, and especially I think that he liked it that we were a couple. I think that he was, that early experiment in families being at the monastery, I think captured his imagination.
Well, so it happened anyway, because of him.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got married and went off to Tassajara. So I was pregnant at Tassajara for one practice period. Then we left and went to the city and had our twin boys, surprise, surprise, and and went back to Tassajara 7 months later and stayed there for 4 years.
Hey, you remember I mentioned to you I had that we joined a couple around the corner for Waisak. Well, that's Jesse Weinstew, who was one of your son Aaron's roommate at RISD.
Oh, yeah. Noah.
Oh,
Jesse, right? But he's trying.
Jesse. Yeah, he lives around the corner.
I remember him. Wow. Well, give him my love.
I will.
He was a dear person. Yeah. That was Noah went to RISD, and yes, that was Noah's roommate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize that he was in Bali.
Yeah. Tell Norman to come. Tell Noah to come. Well, Norman too. You all come visit.
Yeah. We'd love to. So then we were at Tassajara for 4 years, and during those 4 years, Norman and I decided to be ordained, and that also I think captured Richard's imagination. Like, wow. And so we were ordained with our 2-year-old twins at the ceremony. And there were 9 of us ordained in that group, including, I don't know if I could name everybody, but Paul Haller was one, and I remember Wendy Matlow. Do you remember Wendy Matlow?
Well, of course.
And let's see, who else do I remember? There was, I'm drawing.
So you and Norman and Wendy and Paul Haller were all ordained at the same time in the same ceremony?
Yeah.
Oh.
And Tom, he died.
Girardeau?
Tom Girardeau, yes.
Yeah.
And let's see, anyway, there were 9 of us. Paul, Norman, me, Tom Girardeau, Wendy. So I'm missing 4 people. But,
Yeah, we could go back. That'll be in a windmill, probably.
Yeah.
So they're all on Cuke.com. I refer to them a lot for things like that. Well, that's great. And so that was in 77 or?
The boys were born, our babies were born in 77. So it was in 1980 that we were ordained. And then about a year and a half later, we left Tassajara and went to Green Gulch.
Wow.
I stayed there for like 14 years or something like that.
Yeah. My. So, well, are there any highlights or any anything you can say about like Tassajara, your experience there, and Green Gulch, whatever?
Well, let's see. I mean, there were a lot of highlights at Tassajara. I mean, we went there with our 7-month-old babies and we left with 4-year-old twins. So there were a lot of highlights. But it was the time when Richard decided to have a lot of families come to Tassajara. And I don't know if you remember, do you remember, let's see, Michael Palmer's first wife, Joanna? Do you remember Joanna Palmer? Is that her? I don't know if her last name was Palmer. Remember Michael Palmer, the poet?
Yeah, just really vaguely. He
Anyway,
and I weren't close.
His wife came to, she ran a daycare center in San Francisco. And we're all of a sudden like 9 little babies at Tassajara and inexperienced parents, some of them single parents. Susie Clymer was there, Mary Kunoff was there, Judy Gilbert was there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big group. And the Nelsons, Kim and John Nelson. Yeah. And let's see.
Wow.
Anyway, there were more. And we none of us knew what we were doing. So Richard had Joanna come down and help us out. She met with us and talked to us about, how do you take care of children when some of them are your own and some of them are someone else's? Because the children really need, especially young children, they need to know that they have their parents' first attention. But the other children also need to know that they're being cared for. So it's tricky. Yeah. And she helped us set up the yard. And she had us sit down and have meetings once a week in which each meeting we would pick one child and go around the circle, and each parent would talk about that child, their experience and what they saw in that child. So we each had a whole meeting talking about each other's children.
Without the children being present.
Yeah, the children weren't there, but just because, we were all very young and we didn't know what we were doing. So there's this kind of inclination toward conflict, toward, I want to just take care of my child and sort of leave your child out. I mean, it's just kind of a natural, I'm pulling my child in. So she helped us do that. And she helped us get a handle on how to, assure your own child that you're all there for them. At the same time, take care of all the children, what they need, and understand who they are. So that was great.
I can, that so many things come to mind. The way the lack of multiple generations. Like I was at a ceremony yesterday for our landlord's families. Once a year, they have ceremonies all the time, but this was the important once a year. There was about 30 people there, just around the corner at the little family temple. Very, it's like, say, 30 feet square, 30 by 20 by 30 or so, a small area, but, and there's multiple generations. And what people are doing, their parents had done, and they'd done with their parents, etc. So it's all very relaxed. I mean, there's people talking right in the middle of the most important part of the ceremony. I experienced that in Japan, too. There'd be guys sitting back in the temple smoking and women in the kitchen talking. And anyway, and I just sat with them, and it was 2.5 hours. Had plenty to eat. And it was just very nice and relaxed. And that family owns this whole like it's like an alley, dead end alley. They own all the places here and others elsewhere. But my point is the lack of multiple generations at the same place at the same time. And that's a problem in America.
Yes, yeah. And we were so clueless. And, so that Richard sent us Joanna to help us out. And she just really stood by us and coached us. And she returned a couple of times. It was so important to us. It was so insightful to him to see that we could really use the help. And he knew who that would be.
There were, he had made it clear to Suzuki that, and it wasn't just because of his feeling, that it wasn't, Tassajara was not going to work unless there were women. And Suzuki just never thought of that, So that came from Richard. But also having kids there, pretty quickly it was, kids there in the summer, but we did have pregnant women there in practice periods. And Suzuki didn't know how to deal with that. He didn't handle it well. And one, it went very well for Ruthie Disco, who didn't call herself a student, but would be in the Zendo sometimes. And she had a great relationship with him. But two other women had very, very difficult times and didn't really get any support from, they felt, from anyone. So it was part of the, evolution of early Zen Center there, figuring out how to do that. Those problems weren't repeated. Daya and I were there with Kelly when he was 3 months old. We moved there. And, of course, again, then Richard was the abbot. So he didn't have the problem Suzuki had. So it was great. Anyway, so I just wanted to
by the time we
point.
came along, I mean, I did not want to go to Tassajara to do childcare. I wanted to completely share the hours of the childcare responsibilities with Norman, and that idea apparently had not been so common in the previous generation, and we were very aware of that. So so it was also Keith and Leslie, and also it was Judy Gilbert and Mary Kunoff, who were single moms, and they wanted to be there to practice. So there was really a rallying of the whole Sangha to forward, and they were babies, so we still needed to be primary caretakers, but there was just a lot of interest in people coming forward and helping out.
Wow, that was a particular era. When I was there, I was shuso and director, and I took care of Kelly a lot, but not as much as Diane then. But there were other people who helped. But what about now? That isn't happening now, is it? What's happening now?
Well, let's see. What do I know? We're all older, and now we live in a home. Our lifestyle is completely different. I think. I don't know. I couldn't speak for the people at Green Gulch, but my impression is that the younger families there, and there's 3 couples, and Jiryu is Jiryu and Sarah are one couple, and they're both transmitted teachers, and of course Jiryu's abbot, and they have children. So I
Multiple?
think that
They have two children, or?
yes, they do, and I think that I think there's just an understanding, not only in Zen Center but in the culture, that women also want to have fulfilling so-called professional lives, or in this case, religious lives. And, you make so many sacrifices when you live at Zen Center that it's not likely that a woman is going to make those sacrifices plus sacrifice the opportunity to practice.
Right. What about at Tassajara? I can see that at Green Gulch, but what about at Tassajara? Are there children?
Yeah, my impression, let's see, what do I know? There might not be any children, or if they are, it might just be in the summer. I can't think of any children that have spent a practice period there. Oh, there was an Australian couple that had a baby, and also a couple that is now at Green Gulch. And they had a baby for at least one. They had babies at least for 1 year recently at Tuscaloosa.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's all very interesting. Yeah, the with Zen Center, there's the sort of monastic idea, that doesn't have families. It's like an individual practicing. And then there's the community flow and the family flow. They're all different. There were also different schools of thought. Like Blanche had a more a stricter, more traditional way of looking at what she thought would be best. I can remember talking with her and somebody else, Green Gulch. I mean, I think Blanche wanted a separate place at Green Gulch where people could practice in a strict monastic way. And then, I remember Fu saying, no. And I said, well, can't you have both? And Fu was, again, at least then. I'll be talking to her in a couple of days. So maybe
good. Do my best. Give Fu my best.
Yeah, that's all. That's all very interesting.
About the monastic thing, I always felt that there is nothing more monastic than having a baby. You take care of this baby, come hell or high water, you show up for the baby. The baby, the bell, just like the Zendo, the bell rings, you get up and go to the Zendo. The baby cries, you get up and go get the baby. To me, there was a kind of, there was a continuum between those two responsibilities, or those two commitments. It wasn't a conflict. In my heart. I mean, of course, it was sometimes in terms of time, but in my heart, I felt like, this is, it's the same sort of stuff,
Oh, one thing I just thought about, because the only place I've been outside of Asia in the last 12 years is Johannes' office, Germany, is Richard Baker's place, because they fly me there. I can afford it. And there's no kids there. They don't have, it's not anti-kid. I don't think it's in the Black Forest. There's no infrastructure that I think, I don't think it's a problem. It's just, there's not it's not a form that is conducive to having a family there. But it's very lay-oriented practice at the same time. and very, very comfortable. I really like being there. All right. So there you are you were at Tassajara and at Green Gulch. And how did it work out at Green Gulch?
Well, let's see. We were there for 14 years.
What'd you do in that time?
So let's see. We moved there in '81, and then, of course, the big thing happened with Richard in '83. So just 2 years later. And that of course changed everything, as you know. It changed Zen Center wildly.
Yeah.
So the very first thing was Norman and I and another small group of people at Green Gulch, including Miriam Bobkoff.
Yes.
And Dean Mansholt.
Uh-huh.
And Jerry Fuller. And who else was it? Anyway, those people, there may have been somebody else. We were not jumping on board with the Down with Richard Baker group. We really thought, okay, made a mistake, but we really appreciate this person for what he does and what he's done. And so we made an effort to keep in touch with him, and we started meeting with him at his house. We talked to him about it and met at his house for a while. And this is before he left Zen Center. And it really pissed people off at Green Gulch. And
that you were meeting with him?
Yeah. It was
interesting.
What? Yeah. I mean, so there were, Wendy was another person that was in that group, Wendy Johnson. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what happened, I can't remember the order of operations, but what ended up happening is that we accepted an invitation from Bernie Glassman in New York to go and live with him at his place in New York, Grayston, for 1 year. So we went to the Bronx.
Wow, how was that?
It was great. So we kind of, I remember I talked to Katagiri Roshi about it, and I said to Katagiri Roshi, well, we're gonna take a break from Zen Center and go to the Bronx. And he said, that's great. Go get some fresh air. It was funny because you don't generally go to the Bronx for fresh air, but anyway, that's what we
funny.
did.
That's funny. Yeah.
And so we did that. And
wait a minute. I want to hear how it was with Bernie.
Oh, yes. We spent a year with Bernie studying and, doing his routine. And Norman worked in the bakery, and I managed the little cafe that sold, pastries. And our kids were in second grade, and they walked to school at PS 81, And so we had this whole New York year and made friends. And the practice is very strong there, but it's really different from Zen Center. They work on koans, and they have Bernie was he was this big as life kind of person, but in a different way than Richard.
Yeah.
Big personality, big activity, really impulsive, a lot of love, a lot of everything. And so we lived with them and really appreciated that life for a year. And at the same time, I made a connection with Maureen Stewart Roshi in Boston. So I practiced with her too. And I consider her one of my dear teachers. But after a year, we decided to go back to Green Gulch. We didn't know if we were going to stay in New York or go back to Green Gulch, but we decided to go back. And I think Norman went back and worked in the farm, and I decided, how can I relate to Green Gulch in a way that feels okay for me? And so I decided what I could do is be Nakamura Sensei's assistant.
Whoa, tough job.
And that's what I did. I did that for 3 years.
Oh, gosh. That's something. Yeah. Well, how was that?
Oh, it was wonderful, but it was I was in this little enclosed world, and she's a tough cookie.
Yeah, tell who she is.
So Nakamura Sensei, at that time, she was probably in her late 70s. She was a Japanese tea ceremony and utai chanting teacher. And a tea house was built for her by a, a, a Japanese carpentry crew that were brought over from Japan to construct a tea house in the traditional style. So she lived in the tea house. The tea house was set up with a tea room and the whole thing. And I had been studying tea, and so I raised my hand and said, yes, I would like to take care of her and handle the tea program for her and take her grocery shopping every week and whatever she needed. So that's what I did. And I
Wow.
learned some Japanese.
Mm,
And anyway, she was very tough, but we became very close. She was a dear person.
mm, mm.
I
Yeah,
learned so much from her. I mean, she was definitely a tough person, tough boss.
yeah.
But I just learned so much. She had such a heart.
She should never have gone back to Japan.
I know. I know. I was so sad when a couple of times when I was there in the 3 years, her son came to visit her. And this was a son that I never knew the story, but she had a big falling out with her family in Japan.
Right.
Her her husband, I think what I remember the story, her husband took a second wife, which is kind of what you do if you're a wealthy person in Japan. And she would not have it. She wouldn't tolerate it. So she left. And that's how she ended up in that house where Richard
Oh, yeah.
and Gary Snyder would stay
Yeah.
somehow.
I stayed there.
Yeah.
Not a long time, but I think Ursula was there. It was uh, a, a, studied with, well, what's his name? With a Rinzai teacher. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah. Anyway, she's just a wonderful old, she was elderly and she wore kimono every day. I mean, I never saw her in anything other than kimono.
right,
She, yeah, I mean, she basically lived inside the tea house as though it were, you know, I don't know, 19th century Japan or something.
right.
And, and that's how she related to everyone. So it was so interesting. And she was so tough and dear at the same time.
Yeah. Uh, it, it, when Richard and I think maybe when he visited her, I'm not sure who with, in Japan after she'd gone back. With some of his family, could have been with Sally or something. It was just terrible. His family had just taken
Yeah.
everything from her and put her in a old folks'
Yeah.
home, and she didn't have anything anymore. It was terrible.
Yeah. I remember Sally told me that. She said she
Yeah.
went to visit her at like this horrible old age home and she was in like fluffy pink rabbit pajamas or something stupid like that. I mean, this is a woman who had worn kimono her whole life. So she was in one of those stupid, things, flannel blah. And Sally just saw her and just climbed into bed with her, she said.
Mm,
She was just so happy to see her and so sad for her.
mm, terrible. She shouldn't have gone back.
I
Uh,
know. I know. But she wanted to. I was part of that. I took care of her at that time. And she made the decision. She wanted to go back. Part of it was um, I took her to doctor appointments in San Francisco, and she had a Japanese doctor that she could talk with who retired. And after he retired, she felt like, oh my God, I can't talk to my doctor, and I'm an aging person. How is this going to go? So I think, and then I think her son was urging her to come back to Japan. and probably making promises that they couldn't keep. Anyway, yeah, I was so sorry that she went back.
And that tea house is, when you think of a tea house, you think of something small. That was a formidable building, very traditional, with a beautiful garden.
Yeah. Yeah, and living quarters and a bath. One of my jobs was to build a fire to heat up the water in the bath every day.
Oh, right. That's great. That's great. I did that in Japan in a little temple I was at. Yeah. Oh, gosh. They really made that. I forgot there was that. Really made it traditional. So.
And then after she left,
yeah.
I was Shuso. Now, there's a Shuso story. Do you want to hear that? Or
Yeah.
are you running out of time?
No, I'm not. I can't run out of time.
Okay. There's a Shuso story that you might, I don't know if well, I'll tell the story and you might need to cut it.
No way. I can tell you I won't right now.
Okay, then I'll tell the story because this happened. So I was going to be Shuso at the first possibly the first Green Gulch practice period. And part of the reason that it was going to be then is because I had decided when Nakamura Sensei left, when it was time for her to leave, that I was going to not work at Green Gulch or not work at Zen Center, but be a school teacher. So I had enrolled in a credential program, and it was starting in the fall. So I had this summer, and there was a practice period scheduled so that I think Gil Fronsdale really wanted me to be Shuso before I went into my teaching thing, because he thought maybe I would never come back, So anyway, I was preparing for the practice period, and Reb was going to be the teacher of the practice period. And I think one or two nights before the practice period was to begin, I got a phone call. I answered the phone and I said, hello. And I heard, hello, Kathie, this is Reb. There's something I have to tell you. About a year ago, I was running in Golden Gate Park and I came upon a corpse. A man had shot himself, and he was lying there so peacefully. I just wanted to leave him there, but he was holding a gun. So I took the gun because I didn't want anybody else to find it and get hurt. So I took the gun home and put it in my closet. And then, just a few weeks ago, right outside Zen Center, there was a robbery and a lot of yelling. And I grabbed the gun and I went outside and I started chasing the person. And I got arrested. And now I cannot lead the practice period.
Right. I was the person he called from jail.
Oh, yeah?
Because I was Tenzo in the city, and I answered the phone. And he didn't tell me all was happening. He just told me, take care of, it might have had to do with Taya.
Oh. Yeah.
Take care of some things for him.
Yeah.
And then all that came out. Incidentally, I think he put the gun over several things. He met, one thing he did was the person was in a hidden place that he happened to see, so that people walking by wouldn't see the body. And so he meditated he sat and did zazen with it. Then he took the gun and he put it in a box in the garage in front of where his car went at 340 Page. And then he brought Linda back with him another day to sit with the body. So, then it was him who was the guy. I think the guy tried to rob him, and right outside the garage. So he ran in and got his gun and chased the guy. He didn't even have bullets in it. He had the bullets, though, in a bag in his pocket. And he chased the guy into a project. So here's this white guy with a gun chasing a black guy in the project, and all of a sudden there's these police there going, drop it. Right? And I was on the board, so I had to deal with that a lot. And I was actually his strongest supporter. I said, God, the guy's a Golden Gloves champ. Somebody robs him and he chases him. But, that sitting with the body and not reporting it and stuff is also weird. But you know what? Look at what happened with him and compare it to what happened with Richard. Reb just said, and they said, why did you do that? And he said, greed, hate, and delusion. He didn't defend himself. And that made all the difference.
Made all the difference. That made all the difference. I mean, from some sort of an objective point of view, what he did was weirder and crazier than what Richard did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't have to comment on it.
All Richard did was fall in love and with a beautiful woman and have an affair,
Yeah, that lasted a weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, of course, very disruptive, as such things are. But it's the sort of situation that we can understand. But it was hard to understand what Reb did.
Yeah.
Anyway, what happened to me was I got off the phone. And Norman walked in and I said, "You'll never guess what this."
Oh, wow.
Never guess the phone call I just got. So I told Norman the whole thing and he said, "Huh. So he's not going to do the practice period for you. Okay, let's think." He said, "I'll call Mel. I'll see if Mel's available, like starting tomorrow, to come and lead the practice period." Norman called Mel, and Mel said yes. Mel led the practice period, and we had a lovely little practice period at Green Gulch, and at the end of the practice period, that was the Shuso ceremony that you remember.
Yeah. Well, that puts it all into a bigger story, because there's a lot around that I'm not going to say, because I've said enough. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so what happened next? And are there any highlights that you're leaving out?
Highlights?
Like the really great one when I asked you to go back to Tassajara, and then you talked about the whole family thing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. Well, there was one really difficult thing that happened to me was after, I think I was already teaching school. I think Reb asked me to consider being on the Zen Center board. So I thought about it and I said, okay, that could be interesting. And I was maybe 2 or 3 years into teaching, I can't remember. And I got the position. And so I was on the board, and on the board I was asked to be the chairman of an ethics of a committee to put in place an ethics statement an
Yeah.
ethics policy for the Zen Center, because at that time it was happening all over. My school was going through the same thing. Everybody all of a sudden needed an ethics policy to protect them, from all kinds of stuff. So I was to convene a committee, and we were to pull together an ethics statement. So I convened the committee. We had a really wonderful process. We ended up with an ethics statement, and then it was time to present it to each of the 3 places. But what was going on at the same time was there was this groundswell of support for Norman to be abbot and for Reb to step down. I don't know if you remember, but
I was very involved with that.
you were. You were
maybe not at that. Look, I was involved. I was the board member that, after I had been very supportive of Reb, as soon as he was reinstated, I brought up that I didn't think he should be abbot for life, and that we should have multiple abbots, and they should have rotating terms. And then we had like 6 months of 6 months of like tug of war on that ended with Mel being a co-abbot with him.
I remember you were there. You were at Green Gulch at the time.
I was.
Or had you already moved?
I was Tenso in the city. I'd been at Green Gulch the 2 years before, but I was Tenso in the city.
Anyway, I went to these. I had to go. I was the chairman, so I had to kind of field these meetings in which people were looking at this ethics statement that we put forward.
Yeah.
And there was a very distinct group, pro-Reb group, and they just went after us. They just went after us, and at the same time, there was another group that wanted Norman to replace Reb. So I was kind of seen as the harbinger of evil, because it was my husband. I was sort of putting forward an ethics statement, which the people who were in support of Reb took personally on his behalf.
This might have been later than when. I mean, wasn't Reb co-abbot with Mel at the time?
Reb was he? Let's see. When Norman became abbot, was he co-abbot with Mel, or I know he was co-abbot with Blanche. So this may have happened a couple years later.
Reb stayed a long time.
Yeah.
I think Norman was, good Lord, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember. 95. I think Norman became abbot in something like 94 or 95, probably 95.
Then Reb stayed on quite a long time after that, being co-abbot with Mel, and then maybe with Norman.
He wasn't co-abbot with Norman. Norman never would have done that.
Well, then Norman and Mel or
Norman and Blanche. Yeah, I can't remember how it went.
Norman and someone else. All right.
But anyway, I was attacked at these different meetings, and I ended up feeling like I didn't especially want Norman to be abbot. It wasn't like I was advocating for my husband. But I was being attacked for this ethics statement that they felt was targeting Reb. But it wasn't targeting Reb. It was just a kind of a boilerplate ethics statement. So anyway, I ended up feeling attacked and not kind of defended by Zen Center leadership that I felt should have known better. And so I ended up leaving that situation with not good feelings about Zen Center at all. So I backed away for about maybe more than 5 years.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. Huh, that's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I can understand because I dealt with that sort of thing, although it didn't have the unpleasantness you talked about, but it had the power thing you talked about in that 6 months where we finally decided to have multiple habits with term limits. And that's exactly like what you experienced, what we experienced. But there wasn't any acrimony. It was more like a tug of war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know what did it? That was my last board meeting before leaving and then going to Japan. It was January. I didn't go to Japan until April, but I was moving out, and Elin and I were driving across the country, and I was going back to Texas for a little while. Anyway, we actually voted to have 3, Mel, Reb, and Yvonne. But there was a mistake in how Yvonne was asked. Sort of like, oh, you wouldn't want to be abbot, would you? Oh, no, of course not. She never realized it was a formal request.
Real request.
Yeah. It probably worked out better, just Mel and Reb. Because Mel and Reb got along,
That's good.
And Yvonne would have been trouncing all over both of them. She's strong. But right at the last meeting, Mel said, well, I don't really want to be abbot. I don't, it's not like something I care that I want. And so then it was said, okay, it's been decided Reb will remain as the sole abbot. And I went, wait a minute. Number 1 qualification for being abbot, don't want it. And that changed it. It was 6 months of like that, like a tug of war. And yeah.
Yeah, when I think now about all that we went through during those, 10, 15, whatever it was, years, we had no precedent whatsoever. We were just figuring it out without any, prior experience from anybody. It was really quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's true. I certainly experienced that at Tassajara. So much of what we did was very successful. The restaurant that Richard started in Santa Fe eventually failed, and the guy who owned the building and stuff, I knew his family. They were from Dallas. And he'd called me in the middle of the night to ask about doing it. And I told him, I said, everything he's done up to now has worked very well. However, he had an army of us to help him do it. And we functioned pretty well together. Joe didn't remember the second part later. He just remembered I'd said everything he did succeeded. But that was some, boy, has he been through some changes there. Yeah. I talk to Katrinka sometimes, and we'll look at the past, or I'll look at mine, she'll look at hers, about like mistakes we made, things we're embarrassed about, we wished hadn't happened. But then we say, well, if we hadn't have done that, we wouldn't be here now together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about getting a little older, isn't it? All those stories and those tragedies and those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am, and here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Wow. So, all right. Now, so you were teaching, though.
Yeah, I was teaching the whole time.
So you sort of shifted your loyalty, identity, focus away from Zen Center, but probably not away from practice.
Right, right. I was, and then after a few years, Norman was abbot, and I pretty much stayed away from Zen Center as much as I could while Norman was abbot. I really did not like being the wife of the abbot. That's a creepy position. It's creepy. I remember somebody came up to me shortly after he was made abbot. A woman came up to me and said, "Oh, you're like a goddess. You're just like a goddess." And I just practically vomited. I mean,
Oh,
I just
God.
couldn't.
Oh.
Let me out of here. So anyway, we moved to Muir Beach at that time. I felt I was going to need to move off campus in order to tolerate this. So we did, and I taught
Moved to
school.
Muir Beach.
Yeah.
You got Charlotte Selver's home.
Well, we moved to Charlotte's home about like 8 years later because
Oh, is
Charlotte
that
was
right?
still,
Yeah,
yeah,
because she lived forever. Yeah.
yeah, she lived forever. And so we lived in a couple of other places in Muir Beach.
Oh, yeah, I
Well,
forgot.
and I was teaching school, and Norman was abbot, and then he stopped being abbot and founded Everyday Zen.
What year was that? About 2000 or?
2000. Yeah, he was abbot for 5 years.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh, he didn't take the full.
No,
He could
no.
have re-upped.
Yeah, he could have, but he felt that he knew what he wanted to do, and he felt like, if he did a whole, I mean, he was feeling like he was not so young, and he wanted to start what he wanted to start sooner rather than later. And it was
Yeah.
also, I can't remember why, but it wasn't a bad time for him to step out. I think there were people ready to take the position, and so he felt comfortable for Zen Center for him to step out,
Yeah.
and he felt inclined for his own life to, he was ready to do the next thing.
Yeah, and that's worked out well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah, it has. Everyday Zen is a great model for an organization that, I mean, Norman left Zen Center with a kind of allergy to real estate. So he wanted nothing to do with a temple.
Smart. Yeah.
Yeah. So he just rented space here and there and just started this group, and it's still going strong, and it's all over the country, and it's allowed him the flexibility to write a bazillion books and to teach in the way that he wants. So it's great.
So you say for about 5 years, you stayed as
Anyway.
distant from Zen Center as you could.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I mean, I showed up when it was appropriate, but
Yeah.
I was not inclined to participate on my own at Zen Center.
Right.
And then after a while, I started to come back, especially to everyday Zen things. I started doing sessions again with the everyday Zen, and then bit by bit, I came back into Zen Center, and then um, at some point, I thought, I've been doing this a long time. I think I want Dharma transmission. At least I want to talk to somebody about it. So Norman said, well, why don't you go talk to Mel? And I did. And Mel was enthusiastic. And so I got Dharma transmission. It took a few years, but I got Dharma transmission from Mel.
Mm. Mm. And then what?
Well, let's see. I was still teaching school for maybe about 5 more years, maybe not as many as 5, maybe 3 or 4 more years. And then when I retired, I asked myself, well, Kathie, you have Dharma transmission, you have some responsibility here. What do you want to do? And what I didn't want to do, I think I told you this, I didn't want a website. I didn't want, a mailing list. I didn't want donors. I didn't want an organization. So I decided, well, what do I want? And I thought, well, I can say yes. I will start saying yes. When I'm invited to do something, I will say yes. And so that's what I started doing.
That is a, what would you say? That is a highlight. That is very good, memorable. And so, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Has that brought us up to the present without
pretty much
without any regrets that you didn't say something?
No regrets. I think I told you the whole story and some, and then some. And I feel like I'm as busy as I want to be now. So I'm still saying yes, at least in my heart. And sometimes I have to say yes, but it's got to be postponed for a while.
Well, you said yes to me, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with you. Very good. This is one way in which I experience Sangha. And
well, this is really dear for you to do this with people. I mean, this is the kind of conversation that we don't usually have with each other, right?
Right.
We
Right. Oh, it really makes me appreciate people. I've said this on other podcasts a number of times, that people really come to life for me. I mean,
you're wonderful to talk to, David. You are encouraging and warm and informal in a way that makes me feel comfortable.
Good. Yeah. And, I have a problem with women. Not personally with women in my life, but getting women to do podcasts. And there have been a few I've done podcasts with. Afterwards, they say, "Oh, I don't want, I don't want you to post that." There was only one guy that did that, and he should have. Really, he could not. His internal editor wasn't. It did not serve him well, but I've thought about it. The number of women that have things to share that people, a lot of people tell me that the So our oral written history, the interviews with people are as inspiring to them as the stuff about Suzuki or Katagiri or Baker or whatever, you know. And so I'm sort of a reporter in a sense.
Yeah.
And I love to do that. But I don't know, I think about it. Why so many women? And women are under a type of pressure socially that men aren't, I'd say, in general. I think, anyway, I could go down that.
I think, David, also a lot of women in an organization like Zen Center coming up from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s a lot of women have been in a variety of compromised situations that, and you know how it is when you're in a compromised situation, you're not quite sure if it's your fault or their fault, or you're not quite sure what's going on. And I think it's difficult to talk about that. And I think most women, I mean, we learned this from the Me Too movement when it just kind of exploded. And it's because so many women have stories and, difficult stories. And it's a challenge for a woman to figure out how to share her story. I mean, speaking for myself, I don't have any lurid stories to share, sorry. But so for me, this is not personally the case so much for me, but I do know how many women have gone through really difficult periods as women in an organization like Zen Center. And now, I know about Upaya and I know about, Bernie's group in New York. I've been, part of those. And it's true in those places too.
Well, the Zen Center I arrived at in '66 it had some strong women, but it was so male dominated. I mean, it was just the change in Zen Center over the years. One of the biggest changes would be the rise of the female.
Yes. Yeah.
And the rise of the gay.
That's right. That's right.
It really, there were gays at Zen Center back then, but they didn't, feel comfortable saying so. But I've talked to some that said they felt very comfortable at Zen Center, but they didn't really come out of the closet. Then until like Del Carlson and Isan were just, that was
out there.
Yeah, they were no problem. And but anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And right now there's socially in America, there's a big unfortunate backlash against everything everything good.
Yeah, everything good, exactly. And I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I do know there's an awful lot of people in the country and in our community, certainly, who basically won't stand for it. Right?
Yeah, but it's still split too close to 50-50, because people are so poorly informed.
That's right. And it's also unclear as of yet what a person can do. So we're all kind of poised, ready to actually step forward and really do some things.
Yeah.
You know what? No, last week, there's a group, the Eugene, Oregon Zen Center. I can't remember who the teacher is, but they're planning a march from Eugene to Washington, D.C. They're going to start on July 4th or July 5th, and they're walking across the country. They've created a nonprofit organization, and they're doing the organization and the fundraising and the publicity now. Well, you know what I can do for you is, I can't remember the name, but Norman just talked to the woman last week. And so I will, Norman's, like I said, Norman is in Detroit at the moment, so I can't.
So yeah, send me whatever you have on that. That would be interesting.
Yeah, we're all doing what we can and waiting for, and just keeping our eye out for more than we can do.
Right.
And anyway, this March thing, you know, I read last week, and this was in a newsletter that it didn't even make it to the New York Times front page or anything, that the Cory Booker and Joachim Jeffries, you know, two senators.
No, Joachim Jeffries. Yeah, all right, go on.
They decided to do a conversation on the steps of the Capitol on Sunday. They started at 6 a.m. with prayer. And what they did is they just sat on the steps of the Capitol and talked to people as they came by about their commitment to their religious practice, and how, you know, they talked about how it had their commitment to work in the government came out of their religious practice throughout their life. They're both African American, and they talked about the Black church and how they had gone to the Black church, and they encouraged others to come and tell their stories of what is their inspiration for reaching out to the community and doing, you know, helping. So they framed the whole conversation in a positive, inclusive way. And of course, as you know, the conversation is framed in a completely divisive way. So they were recreating a conversation in an inclusive way, and just including everybody that came by. Lots of representatives and a bunch of senators came by in the course of the day and shared their stories and, you know, reiterated their commitment, you know, through their religious belief. And it wasn't just Christian, it was all kinds of spiritual, you know, statements. But I thought, wow, that's great. You know, that sounds like, first of all, it sounds like it would be a really interesting thing to participate in. And it's kind of puts us all in the same community rather than dividing us up. So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
But this is not a quick fix. This is.
But, you know, there's things happening now that it's a different time in history. There's things happening that are going to change everything so fundamentally. Climate change, artificial intelligence, fusion, the next step in computers, what's that called? I can't remember what it's called, but it would it just change everything. I think there's a chance that everything we think of as important is going to get washed aside. Now, the chance of nuclear war, accidental nuclear war, is also there, and that can't be pushed aside.
No. No.
All right. Well, on that cheery note.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to talk with you. I mean, it's been a long time since, you know, we've been like in the same place.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure. It's just a pleasure, David. And I really like the work you're doing.
Yeah. Great talking with you. Thanks a lot. Say hi to your husband for me.
I will.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye. So thank you, Kathie Fischer, Sokaku Kathie Fischer. I really enjoyed that. I love your attitude. I like your attitude about teaching. And remain as non-digital as you can in these coming years. We need more people like you. Okay. This has been a Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogge Bandita, Feline Manis, and dear lovely Katrinka in spirit. Right now, she's a guest of a friend in Australia. But she'll be back in a week from tomorrow. That's a 3-week trip. I've got a lot of work done, but it'll be good to have her back. And anyway, the point of all this is to say we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.